Uh, Welcome to the another season of our Fireside Chats. My name is Shreyas Deshmukh, co-founder of Asian Pathfinders, along with Pallavi Ade. We welcome you all for today's Fireside Chat on tensions in the Taiwan Strait and its impact on regional security. Before heading to today's session, few guidelines, rules that please respect the views of others, but also do express yourself with your questions and views in the comment section. Respect intellectual property, and also participants should stay on mute because to reduce the noise, we record these sessions for our YouTube channel, and the people who cannot join today for the wider benefit of wider community. Uh, we regularly update our sessions on the YouTube channel, and you can also reach out to us for suggestions and ideas through our social media. Now coming to today's session, I request Abhishek Verma to moderate the session. Abhishek is currently pursuing his PhD in Diplomacy and Disarmament from School of International Relations, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Earlier, he worked with India Future, which is an independent media organization dealing with international politics. Abhishek has also worked with Diplomatic Review and Institute for Asian Crime and Security, IACS. It is an US-based non-profit organization and think tank that promotes transnational security. He has published many articles and research papers on reputed research platforms. So thank you, Abhishek, for joining us today. And I would like to also thank our speakers, Sana and Don, for joining us today and taking out time on the weekend. So over to you, Abhishek, for the further proceedings.
Hello, hope I am audible.
Yes.
Thank you, Shreyas, for organizing this discussion on such an important topic. It's important not only for regional security, but it has implications on orientation of global security architecture. The conflict has become a theater of great power projection between a superpower trying to showcase their continued preponderance over global security architecture and a revisionist power eager to challenge global security status quo to advance its own national interest. So let me brief you about the event that exactly happened. Amidst furious warnings from China, US House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi, second in line to the US presidency, visited Taiwan on 2nd August 2022 in what was termed as the highest level US visit in 25 years. Previous such visit was in 1997 when Republican Speaker Newt Gingrich visited Taiwan. The visit was condemned by Chinese as a major political provocation and vowed a targeted military operation as countermeasure. These countermeasures included Chinese fighter jets crossing median of Taiwan Strait, live fire drills at 6 regions around Taiwan, and economic sanctions on Taiwanese exporters. Within weeks of Pelosi's visit, fresh 5-member US congressional delegation visited Taiwan to reaffirm United States support for Taiwan and to encourage stability and peace across Taiwan Straits. Again on 17th August, as ANI reported, 17 Chinese military aircraft and 5 ships crossed median line of Taiwan Strait in what Chinese called combat alert patrols and military drills in waters and airspace around Taiwan. Recently, in an interview with CNN, Taiwan's foreign minister, while Chinese military drills were underway, said that Taiwan is really worried as China may launch a full-scale war on Taiwan. But at the same time, he vowed the resilience of Taiwanese. Before we move on to our esteemed speakers of the day, let me give a brief historical and contextual analysis. The genesis of Taiwan crisis goes back to the post-Second World War Chinese Civil War, wherein communist forces captured power in mainland China, forcing Kuomintang nationalist forces to retreat to what was earlier called Formosa Island. Since then, China has been vowing to reunify Taiwan politically and territorially into mainland China. And this ambition of Chinese is precisely the reason for fourth Taiwan Strait crisis, with latest being the ongoing crisis. Taiwan is a self-governed democratic state, officially called Republic of China, People's Republic of China considers Taiwan as integral part of mainland China and therefore tries to isolate the island internationally, opposing any country from maintaining official contacts with the self-rule island under its One China policy. Ever since the United States revoked diplomatic ties with Taiwan in 1979 and committed adherence to One China policy, countries with diplomatic ties with Taiwan has consistently reduced. At present, only 14 countries have diplomatic ties with Taiwan, and those are mostly the small island nations. Economic prowess of Taiwan can be gauged by the fact that it holds member status in more than 40 organizations, mostly economic and regional organizations, like Asian Development Bank, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, as well as the most important one, World Trade Organization. Taiwan's GDP per capita is almost 3 times that of China, and China-Taiwan trade relations was $328 billion last year, with $178 billion surplus in favor of Taiwan. With regard to recent trade sanctions, the value of trades targeted by Chinese sanctions amount to less than 1% of Taiwanese GDP. Hence, implications of economic sanctions as of now remains marginal. And in addition to the economic sanctions, China has sanctioned 11 officials, including Taiwanese premier, foreign minister, and parliament speaker, from entering mainland China, calling them independent diehards. So, to discuss more on various aspects of the topic, we have two esteemed guests. We have Dr. Sana Hashmi. She is a postdoctoral fellow at Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation and an affiliate scholar at Research Institute of Indo-Pacific Affairs. We also have Mr. McLain Gill. He is Manila-based geopolitical analyst and author who specializes in Indo-Pacific affairs, Philippine foreign policy, and India-Southeast Asian relations. He has over 100 publications to his credit. Don is also regularly interviewed by international news channels on a wide array of issues regarding Indo-Pacific affairs, South and Southeast Asian geopolitics, and Philippines foreign policy. Without further ado, let's hear our speakers. Now, I pass on the virtual floor to Ms. Sana Hashmi for her introductory remark.
Thank you, Abhishek, and thank you, Shreyas, for inviting me to speak in your think tank. And it's been a pleasure. I've known you for so long, so of course it's a pleasure to speak here today. So this is a timely topic, and this is going on right now. The tensions are going on in this cross strait, Taiwan Strait. And I think this is a topic that we need to discuss more in India. The implications of the current tensions in the Taiwan Strait on India and how it is going to impact the regional security, because it has repercussions not just for Taiwan, not just for China, and not even just for Japan, but also for the wider region. So I think before talking about the impact of the tensions on the region, primarily India, I'll give a brief overview of what has happened, what has been China, US, Taiwan's, as well as India's response. So the current tensions began with the visit of US House of Representative Speaker Nancy Pelosi earlier this month. And though I don't really see the visit as a provocation, I feel that it was just a reason for China to react the way it has reacted, and it is still reacting. So there's no departure from the past. We have seen that congressional visits are very common between the US and Taiwan, and now it's even becoming more common between Taiwan and some of the European countries as well. So it's neither Taiwan nor the US that have changed the status quo in the Taiwan Strait, but it is China that has been doing that. And I'll explain how. So let me talk about Taiwan's perspective first. So what the visit meant for Taiwan. So far, the visit was received very well in Taiwan. Despite the rhetoric from China, Taiwan went ahead and received Pelosi, and there was a lot of fanfare around that. So this shows that they are moving away from the idea that Taiwan's external engagement angers China. So here we have to acknowledge that whatever Taiwan does, whatever Taiwan is doing to increase and improve its external engagement in its international space, it angers China. We have been seeing this at least since 2016. So and also I don't think that the visit was symbolic in any way. I think it was totally opposite of what the symbolic could mean in this context, and it really worked in Taiwan's favor. I'm saying this because what China has been trying to do in the past several years is to shrink Taiwan's international space. Chinese leadership is really trying to isolate Taiwan. And since 2016, China has been poaching Taiwan's diplomatic allies. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, China and even the WHO to some extent, it didn't let Taiwan participate in any of the high-level meetings and leaving it alone to fend for itself during the pandemic. So this is one of the motivations for Taiwan to diversify its external relations and expand its international space. So the visit was important for Taiwan because it has reassured Taiwan of the US commitment towards Taiwan amid China's rising aggression, and that it is not alone. And it's standing up to China's aggression, it's standing up to a bully. In this context, it's not really alone. And then Pelosi visited Asia with an aim to reassure the United States allies of its commitment towards the Indo-Pacific. The visit, Pelosi's Taiwan visit further established that Taiwan is very much a part of the US wider Indo-Pacific strategy. And even though Taiwan wasn't really invited to the US Indo-Pacific Economic Framework that was announced on the sidelines of Tokyo Quad Summit in May 2022, I feel the visit sent an important message to the other countries as well in the Indo-Pacific that the US is indeed serious about Taiwan, as well as tackling the China challenge in the Indo-Pacific. So I feel that it really worked in Taiwan's favor, and this is some of the reasons that I've listed were important for Taiwan in the context of Pelosi's visit. Now to talk about Taiwan's response to the crisis, I feel, and being in Taiwan, what I'm seeing is that Taiwan's response, the president response, it has been measured and calculated. President Tsai Ing-wen hasn't really given any interview to news channels, but she has issued a few videos, and I feel that Taiwan is not really trying to be provocative in its response and its statement. For example, there was a statement that we won't retaliate, but we are going to fight for our sovereignty. So I think Taiwan, by merely trying to engage the international community, is not really provoking China. It is only attempting to expand its global space primarily for the welfare of its people. And I don't think that it is Taiwan is changing the status quo or seeking formal independence. I think this is what something is considered provocatory, but there is no official policy change from Taiwan side. Now, of course, US is one of the most important players in this entire situation. So I feel once the news of the visit was leaked, and after what Biden responded, his statement about Pelosi's visit, the US had to go through with the visit. There was no other option for the US. Otherwise, it would have impacted US position in the Indo-Pacific, and it would have impacted Taiwan, how Taiwan sees US and Taiwan-US relationship, and as well as Taiwan's trust in the US. So this is something that the US does not want, specifically when the US-China competition is going on, we are seeing great power rivalry. So I don't think this would have been a favorable preferred scenario for the United States. So they had to go through with the visit. And also, China did not react strongly to any of the visits before. So the strong reaction came only after Pelosi's visit. From the US perspective, its Taiwan policy has been strengthened, and such visits are a part of the US wider policy towards Taiwan. And US policy towards Taiwan includes improving exchanges between the countries while assuring China that there is no change in this status quo. US still acknowledges the one China policy, and it does not support Taiwan independence. But at the same time, it expects China to respect the status quo and not escalate tensions and not intimidate Taiwan militarily or use weaponization of trade, use economic coercion against Taiwan. So I feel that from Taiwan and US perspective, the visit was very, very important for a variety of reasons. But now coming to China's response. China's response has been that of an overreaction, specifically seen from Taiwan. In the past 2 years, I've seen several congressional visits to Taiwan from a lot of countries. So I feel that we haven't really seen such kind of reaction, what we are seeing right now. So what China has been doing is, I think it's changing the status quo, establishing a new normal. And I think this has been established also how China is trying to normalize its military activities around Taiwan. So I think even before Pelosi's visit, they were looking for a reason to normalize its activities around Taiwan. So China's anger is not just linked to Pelosi's visit, but it has been building up since 2016, since Tsai Ing-wen came to power. So when Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen assumed charge in 2016, the newly appointed government refused to accept the so-called 1992 consensus and emphasized on the self-determination of the Taiwanese people in deciding about the fate of Taiwan. So, in fact, in several statements and several articles, Tsai Ing-wen focused on how they need to focus on the democracy that's hard earned by the people of Taiwan, and the future of Taiwan has to be decided by Taiwanese through democratic means. So I think this is something that has not been liked by the Chinese CCP leadership. And in the past 2 years, in addition to what has happened and what Taiwanese policy has been, Taiwan's international space has also been increased. And I think China did not really see it coming. China did not expect Taiwan to get this much attention in the past 2-3 years. So since 2019, 2020, we have been seeing that China did not renew the visa for several foreign correspondents. But what it did not expect that most of them would come to Taiwan. And so the world got to know Taiwan's side of the story through foreign correspondents who are based in Taiwan. And plus how Taiwan was appreciated during the COVID-19 pandemic. And a lot of countries, people from a lot of countries began to see Taiwan that is beyond China. And it was opposite of what China expected and wanted. And I think even if you look at it, India's example here, even in India, of course, China is a major factor. We talk about Taiwan. We see a lot of news channels reporting on Taiwan. They want to focus more on China. But if you talk to people during the pandemic, you would realize that there was a lot of awareness about how China handled the pandemic and how the news channels started reporting about Taiwan's COVID-19 response. So I think that played a major role in how Taiwan is viewed and seen in India, of course, apart from the China factor and apart from the same threat that both India and Taiwan have been facing since at least 2020. So I feel that from China's perspective, China has been looking for a reason to teach Taiwan a lesson or just deter it from attempting to engage with countries across different regions. So I think Pelosi's visit was not really a provocation or a reason. It wasn't even a trigger, but it was an opportunity for China. It had to somehow normalize its military activity so that they were, so that it could, for example, see how prepared Taiwan is and Taiwan's resolve to standing up to China, and then also deter the US and Taiwan to engage further. There were a lot of engagement between the US and Taiwan. So I think this is something that was not really liked by China. And apart from that, what China also wanted to do is to deter other countries from engaging Taiwan. We saw a lot of European countries became very forthcoming towards Taiwan. We have seen G7 statement, we have seen the US, South Korea joint statement, US, Japan statement, and even Australia, US and Japan joint statement regarding Taiwan. And it's a way of China's way of telling other countries that relations with China are far more important than Taiwan. And by engaging Taiwan, these countries are merely taking risk. And I think this is something that has been working on some of these, at least Asian countries, for example, some Southeast Asian countries, and I'm sure that Don will be talking about, or perhaps giving us a Southeast Asian perspective on how Taiwan is viewed in the region. But and other reasons also include that it wanted to use this entire situation and China's overreaction, its aggression, as a way to project itself as a stronger country in front of domestic audience as well as, of course, international audience. And what the Chinese officials, Chinese Minister Wang Yi, what they have been trying to do is to try and change the narrative regarding China and Taiwan, that China is a victim here on Taiwan and US and infringing on China's sovereignty. And we are seeing that how several diplomats in different countries are writing op-eds, are giving interviews, holding press conferences, and trying to show that, you know, whatever the US and Taiwan are doing are not right, and US is interfering in China's internal matter. So we have already seen its response. What China has already started doing, responding to the tension But in my opinion, the tensions are going to simmer more, and China's response is going to be fivefold in the near future. So first is, of course, spreading disinformation, and Taiwan is not new to China's disinformation campaign. And we also saw during Pelosi's visit how disinformation was spread from the Chinese side. And Taiwan is also a victim of several cyber attacks from China's side, and we are going to see more of it in the coming, in the near future. Then China is also going to intensify its economic coercion. And apart from that, I've already talked about how Chinese leadership, how Chinese officials are trying to seek reassurances, and they are trying to shape the narrative in China's favor in several countries. And what we are seeing right now, and what we are going to see more, is the further intensification in the naval and air incursions. And now what China is doing more and more is crossing the median line. So there was this understanding that, China is encroaching into Taiwan's ADIZ, but median line is not something that China used to cross. But I think this is something that they're also normalizing now. Now, coming to India's response, of course, India is still waiting and watching what is happening in the region. But we saw last week, India's statement came out during the press briefing of the Ministry of External Affairs, and India expressed concerns about the situation and urged the country, we know what that country was. It was China, to not unilaterally change the status quo in the Taiwan Strait. So the statement was definitely aimed at China. And despite China's ambassador to India's op-eds, statements, press conference for urging India to mention and to acknowledge the One China policy, India did not mention the One China policy in its statements. Of course, we have our own reasons. We have not been mentioning One China policy since 2010 and 2014. Sushma Swaraj, then Foreign Minister of India, she told Wang Yi that India won't accept the One China policy until China accepts One India policy. So the non-acknowledgement of the One China policy is primarily due to India's reason. But of course, what we have to see is that India didn't really mention One China policy. But despite all these developments, India is still very, very cautious while engaging Taiwan, even though there's growing engagement, there's growing bonhomie and willingness to engage Taiwan. So that is specifically important when the two countries are facing similar challenges in the face of China threat. So the focus right now is to strengthen ties in areas that do not really impinge on their relations with China, both Taiwan and India. But whatever India's policy has been, it's cautious. As a lot of people and a lot of articles criticize India's policy as being overly cautious. But despite that, there is definitely greater cognizance of the fact that China's aggression is rising in the Indo-Pacific, and there needs to be a collective response. Now to conclude, so the options, in my conclusion, I talk about what are the options for Taiwan, US, China, and India. For Taiwan, it has already stated that it is going to, it's not going to retaliate, but it's going to protect its sovereignty. So it's focusing on diversifying its relations, telling its story to the world, trying to prepare itself for its self-defense, and it's very transparent in its response. Like whatever is happening in the Taiwan Strait, Taiwan is being very, very transparent and trying to tell a story to the world. With respect to the US policy has also been forthcoming despite the tensions with China and China suspending military and economic dialogues, even the climate change dialogue with the US. US isn't really backing down with its engagement with Taiwan. Recently, it was announced that US and Taiwan are going to start negotiation for a trade pact. Then even after Pelosi's visit, we saw another delegation visit. So there is a continuity in US-Taiwan policy. And for China, I think what US is doing is not really abandoning or sacrificing Taiwan, not anymore. We have to see what happens later, but at least this has been the policy right now. With respect to China's intimidation, both military intimidation and economic coercion, we are going to see more of it. It's going to continue. We are going to see more of encroachments into the median line, and of course, cyber attacks. And I think so this China's policy, we are in a long haul here, and I feel that we are going to see more of China's aggression with respect to Taiwan. Now, with respect to India, India is still trying to manage its ties with China, its dispute with China. So it's not going to be really forthcoming with Taiwan right now. But Dr. Jaishankar recently said that I trust people closer to the problem in the Indo-Pacific region. So I think with that, there would definitely be a response that is focused on countering China in the Indo-Pacific. Perhaps we are going to see more of a security cooperation within the Quad. We have to wait and watch, but I feel that there is going to be a lot more pushback against China. So with this, I stop and I welcome questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sana. So, summarizing what you said, you contextualize the event with the present geopolitical situation in the region. You believe that the event states U.S. commitment to Taiwan's security. And with respect to Taiwan, throughout the visit, Taiwan was never provocative. Finally, you view the visit not at all extraordinary or violating the status quo, except Chinese overreaction. China's only concern, according to you, is to thwart international country-to-country relations with Taiwan. With respect to India, you believe India's reactions. India has followed a cautious approach towards the issue, and India believes that there has to be a collective response towards Chinese aggression. Now, I would like to pass on the floor to Mr. Don McLain Gill.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. And of course, I would like to thank Asian Pathfinders for organizing such a significant topic. And of course, I would like to continue from the very comprehensive and very insightful discussion of Dr. Sana, particularly gearing towards a better understanding of how Southeast Asia perceives the current situation between Taiwan, the United States, and China, and how this really configures the security architecture of the Indo-Pacific, with a specific reference, of course, to the Western Pacific Ocean. Now, if we understand and if we look into the current situation between the United States and China, while a direct shooting war may not be in the works anytime soon, you know, the heated exchanges that we all have been talking about in the past few minutes between both states reflect a more potent implication for domestic politics and their global image and influence, particularly in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. Now, you know, the US image, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, has been tainted due to Washington's haphazardness and preoccupation away from the region. So we talk about from the messy withdrawal from Afghanistan to the situation that is ongoing now in Ukraine, the growing ambivalence towards the US or any US-led framework is a critical factor for this particular action. Now, despite lacking a unified front with the White House or within the White House, we could see a little, you know, a little dilly-dally between President Biden and, of course, the rest of the politicians within Washington. We could see that this was a necessary step from Washington's perspective to reassure their allies in Asia and the Indo-Pacific that the US is still committed to engaging with and within the region proactively to ensure that the alliance network in Asia and the Eastern Hemisphere is still functional, and that the US has not forgotten its principles and its prerequisite regarding the preservation of the rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific. In addition, we could definitely see that these moves, this particular move by the United States, the visit of Nancy Pelosi, and of course the other delegation that came right after, and the statements that we can see, these moves can be seen as a slow realization by the West, the United States in particular, that China's growing assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific is seen as a more critical threat, maybe compared to Russia. You know, as we can see that China's economy is 10 times bigger. And in fact, China is the state with the global ambitions compared to Russia. And as we can see with the preoccupation towards Europe and away from Asia, we can definitely see that these moves by the United States, in addition to boosting the level of military and naval cooperation and exercises with Japan by a significant percentage. All of these are seen as the perception of the United States to show that it understands the current security architecture in the Indo-Pacific. Now, that's a U.S. perspective, very briefly, that I'd like to point out. Now, if we go to China, as Dr. Sana has rightfully mentioned, there's really nothing exclusively symbolic about this visit by Pelosi. As we all know, Pelosi is known for being a China hawk, not just recently, but also in the past decades. She has been notorious within the CCP for her actions that really go against the interests of the political party. Now, many of you are also aware that the CCP's officials have also been concerned regarding Pelosi's trip because it intersects with the upcoming Chinese Communist Party Congress, where President Xi Jinping is expected to seek a third term. Now, given, of course, the problematic domestic situation in China, economically speaking, and of course these external threats which tend to to challenge the interests of China, of the PRC towards its expansionist interests, this looks in a very negative light, particularly for China's leadership, particularly for President Xi Jinping. Hence, a strong response towards the issue, of course, is seen to ignite a stronger level of nationalism among its people. But as we can see, while China continues to grow, while many may not really emphasize significantly that there may be a direct shooting war, but the level of actions that it can do regarding the situation in terms of its coercion, its provocation, may significantly intensify as it continues to gain material capabilities. And as we can see, the list of current activities that China has been doing vis-a-vis Taiwan since the visit is seen to have scaled up. However, it is also not. It's also important not to underestimate, of course, the level of provocation China can do vis-a-vis Taiwan and the United States, for that matter. So, as we can see, it's also important not to underestimate the chances of not having a war. As we can see, for that matter, the situation in Eastern Europe, several commentators have been quite positive about Russia's actions, and it would remain limited to its side of the border. But unfortunately, the situation escalated because, as we can see, states are rational actors, and they would engage based on strategic calculations of their interest. And if they see that the costs may be less than the benefits, then that is something that they may take a chance on. However, as we can see, Taiwan is not Ukraine, and in fact, the chances of escalating this further, and of course, the political economic implications would be far greater than that we are seeing in Ukraine. So, as we can see, there was a full-scale invasion of Taiwan may really not be in the immediate time frame of the Indo-Pacific security architecture. What we can see is that there would be more efforts to really press economically, and of course through military exercises. So economic consequences, as I have mentioned before, would be far worse than what we are witnessing today in Ukraine and of course in Eastern Europe. So China really rolled out import curbs on Wednesday, right after. We talk about fruits, citrus fruits, fish from Taiwan, and halted the shipments of sand. Now, while many may say that this is something very significant, we can see that China's ability to provide these particular sanctions have also been limited. As we can see, the citrus fruits sanctions really just accounts for 0.1% of Taiwan's GDP, and the total actions that it has been doing economically since the visit really accounts for just around 1% of China's GDP. However, we should not forget that China and Hong Kong together makes up 40% of Taiwan's exports. So as we can see, the potential is vast to really create economic pressure on Taiwan, but still we are seeing some level of restraint from China, particularly because of its domestic situation and, of course, its willingness not to also provoke its external environment, given that the leadership is going through a very pivotal period. And again, we talk about the live fires, which also have been significant in the 1990s. This is not the third, rather, this is not the first time that we have seen a Taiwan crisis between the United States and China. We have been looking at it 3 times already, the 1950s and the 1990s, if I'm not mistaken. So another factor that we have to look into would be the reliance on chips that Taiwan really has a significant leverage on. And these chips are very strategic, given, of course, the values that they have for several states, for states around the world, from basic usage to, of course, sophisticated, intricate usage in terms of military technology as well. So these are the things that are at play currently, given, of course, the situation. China would not want to escalate this further immediately, given, of course, the costs that it would face. The United States would also be facing significant costs, especially at a time, as I have mentioned earlier, its influence dwindling in the Indo-Pacific because of the ambivalence towards its actions and its commitments in the region. Now, since I'm based in Southeast Asia, it's very important to really look into, the perceptions of most, if not all, Southeast Asian states. We have to understand that in the event of a shooting war between the United States and China, the Western Pacific, and particularly the East and South China Seas, will be the center stage. They will take center stage within this whole geopolitical development. Now, if we look into the responses and reactions of Southeast Asian states, we can definitely understand the dilemma that they are facing. Southeast Asian countries have warned of a miscalculation in the Taiwan Strait and serious confrontations that may occur between and among the major powers, considering that the Eastern Hemisphere, for that matter, is a significant and pivotal area, and of course will also take center stage when it comes to geopolitical power competition. So the most critical factor in this brewing Taiwan Strait tension, with reference, of course, to the statements released by Southeast Asian states, would be that of ambiguity and uncertainty. The term, we are all aware that the United States has been consistent, of course, in terminologically stating that it would be there to support Taiwan. This has been used time and time and again by the United States to demonstrate its commitment to the island nation. However, Washington does not explicitly commit itself to Taiwan's defense. There is no active mutual defense treaty between the United States and Taiwan, as we are all aware of. And in fact, senior South Korean officials in a recent interview where they insisted on being unnamed were also quite concerned about the level of commitment the United States will have regarding Taiwan. As we can see, if these South Korean officials were stating that if the situation escalates and the US has not proactively stepped up its intervention to Taiwan's aid, then this is something that is also very concerning for South Korea, given, of course, its immediate threat vis-a-vis North Korea. So there is a lot of tension even within the alliance network in the Eastern Hemisphere. So this level of ambiguity is worrisome. And of course, the late former Prime Minister of Japan, Mr. Shinzo Abe, has also emphasized that ambiguity towards Taiwan would be to the detriment of the security calculations of the states in the Indo-Pacific. So, there are several speculations about what may happen. Several voices within Southeast Asia have also been worried that would this be a similar situation or scenario where the US will not directly intervene and push Taiwan to defend itself really to the last individual, such as what is happening in Ukraine. These are the worries that are accumulating within Southeast Asia. So we must understand that a conflict in Taiwan will have direct and immediate implications for its immediate neighbors in Southeast Asia, and not really as direct and as immediate as the United States thinks it would be for itself, sitting thousands of kilometers away. So these states, despite some being US allies, such as the Philippines, will not want to drag themselves deeper into the orbit of the already troublesome US-China power competition. So these countries' economies were already battered during the pandemic. They're going through a tough time because of the situation in Ukraine now. And of course, the humanitarian crisis in Myanmar is also another point of consideration. So the last thing they would really want is a more security, is facing more security challenges in their immediate neighborhood, which will force them really to pick a side vis-a-vis the United States and China over Taiwan, for that matter. So, there needs to be a reassessment within Washington regarding the level of leverage it has among states in the region and how it intends to act responsibly based on the interests of its partners in Southeast Asia, the ASEAN countries, its alliance members such as South Korea, Japan, in order not to provoke and also undermine their own individual security interests as well. So, there's a conventional perception in Washington that simplistically assumes that Southeast Asian states will go above and beyond in sharing the US strategic concerns regarding the Chinese threat. Now, if we look into the classical geopolitical logic, China's position vis-a-vis these countries being their most powerful immediate neighbor in terms of economic and military capabilities, give it a significant and practical leverage over the United States. And in fact, back in 2018, US Navy Admiral Philip Davidson, who then took the role, if I'm not mistaken, as the Indo-Pacific chief, command chief, he has blatantly stated that China is now capable, and I quote, of controlling the South China Sea in all scenarios short of war with the United States. Now, this is a significant declaration, particularly from a senior active military official of the United States. So this is a very unstable situation, of course. And if push comes to shove, we could expect that Southeast Asian countries, despite their affinity towards preserving the rules-based order, would be trumped by, of course, their individual security concerns and their national interests. So the more unstable the relationship between China and Taiwan will become, we could see that the Southeast Asian countries, many, if not most, or all, will be willing to support or really to withdraw their support or lessen their support of the island democracy, given, of course, the impediments that could be accumulated towards their own individual strategic interests. So, according to the CSIS, a very renowned think tank in the United States, they developed these war games, theoretical war games, to really look into the situation. What if this happens in Taiwan? And the United States intervenes, goes on into a full-fledged war, a direct shooting war between the United States and China. What could happen? In fact, they have led to this has led to a significant summary that, under most, if not all circumstances or scenarios, Taiwan may be able to repel the invasion with the help of the United States forces, especially. However, the cost and the losses towards the US defense system and the US forces would be vast, would be significant. Now, the question that remains unaddressed is, will the US be willing to, to let go of such cost, given, of course, that it is also battling domestically a number of obstacles within its borders, particularly the economic situation, the political divide, and of course, as we can see, President Biden's ratings have also been plummeting as we speak. So these are the things that create that level of ambiguity and uncertainty, particularly for Southeast Asian countries, which are sitting just right by the hot spot as we speak. So these are the things that have been quite significant for Southeast Asian commentators, for analysts, for politicians who have been voicing their concerns regarding the ongoing situation, the unfolding US-China power competition in the Western Pacific. So, provoking the security architecture at the expense of its partners, the United States will need to have a more productive, a more recalibrated position that will really try to encompass and balance two particular things. One would be maintaining its influence in the region, and at the same time maintaining proactive engagements with its partners. So we should not consider this, or Washington must not consider Southeast Asia as states that are willing to jump in case anything comes out. So we have to understand that these Southeast Asian states are also rational actors that would really pragmatically engage based on their interests. And for the United States to look at them as partners would be an equal shareholders, for that matter, of the rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific would be something that would be a practical decision by Washington in order to ensure that the environment is ripe for proactive engagements to maintain the status quo and to avoid any instances that would further provoke the security architecture and decrease the influence of the United States in the region. So I wish to stop there. I hope I didn't take too much of your time. And thank you again. I'd be happy to engage after this.
Thank you, Mr. Don McLain Gill. So summarizing what you said, according to you, through this move, US want to assure its allies in Asia and beyond of its continued commitment to the security assurances. Chinese actions would have been implications on nationalism in people in China, and you cautioned international community that the level of provocation from China cannot be underestimated. China has to look into political, economic implications. You talked about strategic role of chips. And talking about Southeast Asia, you said that the repercussion of this escalation would be that of ambiguity and uncertainty in politico-economic landscape of Southeast Asian countries. Now, I open the floor for question answer round. So we have several questions, but before that, I have a question for both of you. Can answer according to your views. As we know that Russia-Ukraine war seems far from over, the credibility of US security assurances to Ukraine was severely damaged in this Ukrainian war. Do you think the Nancy Pelosi's visit and subsequent military brandishing from both sides is a well choreographed event to offset the damages caused to the credibility of US security assurances in Europe? Any one of you can answer. Or both
I'll
of you.
let Dr. Sana go first.
I think we have to stop comparing what has happened in Ukraine to what's happening in Taiwan. And I don't think, because I think she was supposed to visit Taiwan in April and she got COVID. And if you look at her track record, she has always been critical of the human rights violations in China. And Nancy Pelosi has been pro-Taiwan, pro-democracy, and a supporter of Taiwan. So I don't think, and in fact, Biden, if you look at it, you're talking about US is trying to do damage control because of its credibility issues in Ukraine and Europe. I think Biden was the one who actually advised Pelosi against visiting Taiwan, but she still went ahead. So I don't think we could really compare the two issues. And I think we have to stop comparing and linking developments, whatever, because I think Europe and Asia are two different regions. It's not that to improve its image in the entire Indo-Pacific and to stop denting, preventing its image to be dented, it's coming to Asia. I don't think it works like that, not in international relations. I think US is very much focused in the Indo-Pacific region, and Pelosi's visit to the Indo-Pacific region was a part of that wider objective.
Right.
Don,
Yeah. I'd like to hop in on that. We have to understand that it is true, of course, that the geopolitical configurations from both areas, the West and the East, are quite different, given, of course, the differences in material capabilities, the differences in perceptions, and the differences in interests. However, what we can see here is that the visit of Pelosi was also mired with certain levels of criticism, even among the US alliance network in the Eastern Hemisphere, to the point of asking whether it was necessary despite President Biden's caution. And another point of chat is that this visit has also shown that there's also discord within Washington regarding what should have been done within the Indo-Pacific. As we can see, President Biden's Indo-Pacific strategy really focuses on the normative capacity of states in the region. His focus was not to change China, but really to change the normative situation and the environment in which China operates in. And as we can see, such a strategy, of course, has not really bore any fruit for the United States. As we can see, countries in Southeast Asia, countries in the Pacific Islands have also been quite hesitant to really give their full out support to the United States as well. However, these are the things that we have to take into consideration when understanding that the power competition between the United States and China is seen to go beyond the immediate circle of the Western Pacific. And in fact, as many of us are aware, we have to understand that such instances in different areas of the world may not be entirely isolated, but really form into a connected interface of what really these great power ambitions really account to. And it is that particularly middle and small powers in different parts of the world are worried whether or not they would have to fall deeper within the power competition of materially powerful states. And we can clearly see that with the reactions that they have been having throughout. And while the visit per se may not be or should not really be as controversial as it should have been, we could definitely say that there is a shift going on, given, of course, the fluctuation in the distribution of power. And as China continues to materially enhance itself, and at the same time knowing its limitations domestically, we could see more aggressiveness even for the most minute situations. So this is what makes it very volatile and very vulnerable in terms of the security architecture.
Thank you, Mr. Don. I would like to ask Mr. Tanishq to ask questions.
Abhishek,
Hello?
you can ask question on my behalf.
Okay. So his question is, several visits from Congress members from US and ministers from Lithuania occurred and are being planned ahead. What, according to you, that may be the red line and could lead to escalations from all the parties? Could it be something political or military or just a visit? This is a question to Dr. Sana.
I feel that China has different red lines for different countries. For example, with the US, congressional visits are fine, but if any other country, for example, specifically a Southeast Asian country does it tomorrow, China will have a stronger reaction to a to a parliamentarian visit from Southeast Asia to Taiwan. But for Europe, I think it's the red lines are higher, and specifically when we talk about Lithuania is just not congressional visit. Last week there was a visit from Lithuania's transport minister. She was sanctioned afterwards from China, and Lithuania is opening a trade office in Taiwan with its name, most probably. So I feel that there are different expectations that China has from different countries. So I don't think we are going to see any major political or even defense response from China's side when a Central European country does anything with Taiwan. And we have to see the level of importance of these countries for China. US, India, these countries are much more important to China in comparison to, for example, smaller Central European countries. Of course, we are seeing a lot of support for Taiwan from Central and Eastern European countries. But I think it's not something that really warrants a greater or a stronger response from the Chinese side.
Okay, thank you for the response. There is a question from Ram to Mr. Gill. There is no consensus among the ASEAN countries with regard to Taiwan's status and the One China narrative. In addition, North Korea and Russia are both pro-China. In an escalatory situation, do you feel the situation could lead to serious violent action? What would be the response of the Quad to such an escalation? Where does the UN fit in all these? Or is it relevant with two UNSC powers on China line of view?
Right. Thank you so much for that question. In fact, the question consists of very important points. You talked about Southeast Asia, you talked about the Quad, and you talked about the lack of consensus, which is absolutely true. There is no particular consensus. In fact, if we look into the Indo-Pacific as a whole, what makes it unique and what makes it very important is because is the significance of diversification within the region. This is probably not going to be like Western Europe, in fact, and this is one of the reasons why particularly an Asian NATO, which was quite controversial in the past few months, this is not possible because, of course, of the varying interests of states of varying capabilities. So if we talk about Southeast Asia and ASEAN, yes, Southeast ASEAN is not like the European Union. It is not a supranational institution. It is a loose arrangement that really delves on individual state interests. And this is why, as we can see, due to the level of geopolitics and geography, we can see that there are certain states within ASEAN that are now falling closer and closer and deeper into the orbit of China. And there are those states that tend to have that level of willingness to really try to balance between China and the United States. But it really depends on their strategic calculations. As we can see, many of the key states in Southeast Asia are locked in a territorial dispute, a maritime dispute with China, and several of them, if not most of them, are also asymmetrically dependent on China in terms of economic capacity. So, as I mentioned earlier, Southeast Asian states would not want to jeopardize their individual interests when it comes to a situation where they would have to choose sides. I think for them, the most rational option, even for allies such as the Philippines, treaty allies, would not provoke China particularly, and to want to maintain a stable and, of course, a status quo level environment for them to be able to attain their own individual growth and security. Now, you ask about the Quad, and in fact, this is very important, particularly because of India. You know, India, as I have particularly mentioned in my writings before, serves to be the much needed reassurance for Southeast Asian states when it comes to their outcomes and outputs within the security architecture of the region. Why is that? Because India's significantly positioned detail towards strategic autonomy is something that Southeast Asian countries welcome as from a particular security provider. And as India continues to grow in terms of material capabilities, it is a rising great power. And as we can see, this development is welcomed within the multipolar system, given, of course, India's abhorrence for bloc politics, which Southeast Asian countries are also against. And this is something that is significant. And in fact, as we can see, several Southeast Asian countries have also been ramping up their defense and strategic collaboration with India, and also have been incorporating India in trilaterals with other Quad members such as the United States, Australia, or Japan. And this is seen as a significant development for India's foreign policy success and its Act East success, particularly because these countries realize and see India as a state and as a responsible security provider that would cooperate not based on narrowly defined goals or rigid bloc politics, but based on common concerns and interests. So I believe that India's incorporation in the Quad, despite despite the criticism of India's presence, this is the reason why it's not a full-fledged military arrangement. This is the reason why it is still functional and it is still receiving positive reviews within the region, is because it is not of such. And I think that because of this level of property that the Quad has, this would be something more acceptable for Southeast Asian countries that do not want to engage provocatively against their much more powerful immediate neighbor, China. So the Quad, as we can see, a very brief last point, is that we can see that there is still no defined goal for the Quad. It's a wide array of interests, but again, we could look into it through trilateral, bilateral breakup with other countries in the region, and I think that this would be significant given the capacity of the Quad, materially and normatively speaking.
Thank you.
Yes, due to paucity of time, I think one questions to both the speakers would be fine. Can I ask Mr. Shreyas? Will it be fine to have one question?
Okay, thank you, Abhishek. I'll just ask this last question to both the speakers. Is
Okay.
that whenever there is a crisis in this region, immediately after that, the discussion starts about the fault lines within China. Currently, they're talking about the economic downturn in China, how the CCP will hold further in the future. Drought is there, Yangtze River is drying, many companies are not able to produce their products, and GDP is going down. So it is very difficult to understand, though there is not much information coming from never come from China as such about their economic situation. So and this is very relevant to the developments within the region, that how the China is holding and what are the status of the fault lines within China. So that's my question about the status of fault lines in China. So I would ask Sana to go first, and then Don's view.
I think this is something that is alarming to a lot of countries, and specifically this over-dependence on China, be it Taiwan, be it US or India. And I think this is something that India has been really trying to focus on, to reduce dependence on China by banning apps and by trying to reduce huge trade imbalance. So I think if you look at the Indo-Pacific economic framework, so there is a need, and there have been attempts to forge a collective economic pact or an economic arrangement. Of course, TPP couldn't work out. RCEP, India walked away from RCEP. So I think IPEF is something that a lot of countries are interested in. It's not a pact yet, but it's just a framework. And countries are trying to see how their interests could fit into. It's not really anti-China. But I think there are a lot of countries that are realizing that engaging China and then reliance on China is going to be detrimental for their long-term economic interest. For example, if I could give you an example of Taiwan and even China, there is mutual over-dependency on each other. There's a lot of Taiwanese investment, Taiwanese businesses in China, and I think it's a wake-up call for them to come out of Taiwan and invest in other countries. But I think this is the lesson from this entire situation, that over-dependence on China is not really in countries' interest, because if there's a problem in future, China could use it against these countries. China could use it as economic coercion, weaponization of trade. So today is Taiwan. Even we have seen with Australia in 2020 and 2021. Tomorrow it could be India. Tomorrow it could be any other country. So I think there's a need to have a collective economic framework, economic pact. So I think this is what countries are trying to do with IPEF. We don't know how successful it is going to be, but at least Southeast Asian countries are there. They have endorsed it to some extent. We have seen there are Quad countries, interest of G7 countries as well. So I think we just have to wait and watch how it pans out and how countries are responding to it and what US has to present to these countries.
Thank you. Don, please.
Oh, right, yes. Particularly on your question about China's internal situation, it is true that there have been several reports in and out regarding the potential of Chinese slowdown, economic slowdown, and of course the wide array of non-traditional security issues that are also plaguing the country within. We have to understand very briefly that this is something that needs further attention to, and in fact, because of this limitation, in fact, the Lowy Institute has also let out a report indicating that China will significantly slow down in the decades to come. And its future outlook may not be as rosy as many would expect it to be. Now, given, of course, this domestic limitation, China's global ambitions, and of course, every external factor that may help or create tensions towards its ambitions, we could see that there is a significant race towards time. And when a major power realizes its limitations and realizes the time frame that it must sort of reach in order to attain significant goals towards its interests, we can see that there would be more assertiveness given this particular area. As we can see, there has been more assertiveness beginning the US material decline as well. So this is where the situation becomes very difficult for other countries within the region. So, and I agree with Dr. Sana that alternatives must be taken into consideration, because as China continues to increase its assertiveness, as we can see, the economic tool is seen as the most viable option that China may use to coerce its neighbors or partners. So I believe that diversifying away slowly from China is needed, though it is not a fast option given the costs involved in diversifying supply chains. But we can see that this is the most practical long-term option that states would have in the long run.
Thank you, Abhishek. Over to you.
I think I have one very small question for Dr. Sana. This is related to what she said. We should not combine this situation in Indo-Pacific and European situation. So my question is, do you see a possibility of collusion between Russia and China to cause trouble for Western alliance by simultaneously stoking tensions in Europe and the Pacific?
No, I think this is what we have already seen. Russia was the first country to come out in support of China after Pelosi's visit. And there have been several joint exercises between China and Russia. And China-Russia relations are famously known as excess of convenience, marriage of convenience. So we know that it's primarily aimed at stopping US to come in the region. And we have seen what happened in Central Asia in the 1990s, why US is not being able to establish its foothold in Central Asia, primarily because the China-Russia partnership. So of course, there is this consensus between China and Russia that US and the entire West is against China and Russia. So they have to cooperate collectively to see, how they could really contain US efforts in containing both Russia and China. So I think we're going to see more of it, but we also have to see the extent of their response. Russia is, we have seen what has happened to Russia. Russia is not really very successful in Ukraine. So to what extent could Russia really help China? So I think we just have to wait and watch. So are we just relying on China here? We don't have an answer yet.
Okay, so we are reaching the end of the session. I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Sana Hashmi and Mr. Don McLain Gill for taking time out and giving important insights on the issue. We will continue to invite you for such insightful discussions ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abhishek, for the moderating this session. I know these are very dangerous words which we have used: assertiveness, provocation, accretion, and etc. etc. I hope it should not come to that point where the brink needs to be crossed. And I don't know how the hope works in the international relations and the geopolitics, but I'm still hopeful that it should not come to that. But I really thank Dr. Sana Hashmi and Don McLain Gill for taking time out today on the weekend and sharing their learned views on this particular topic. I know there are different aspects we could not cover and we could not take the questions, all the questions which are there in the chat box, but I would request if anybody has a question, they can reach out to us and we can pass those questions to our today's speakers and they can answer those questions on email or on social media. They are available there. So thank you so much. Have a nice weekend. Take care and stay safe. And next week we have a discussion on I2U2. So please join us next Saturday. Thank you, Don, and thank you, Sana, and thank you, Abhishek. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.